So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to turn it back over once again to Shamas Demoret.
All right, thanks, Matt. And thanks so much to those of you that came back for round two. It's good to see you guys here. It's encouraging. So hopefully everybody can stay awake after that lunch. So yeah, again, in case you weren't here for the first one, I'm Shamas Demoret. I'm a sales tech at Nagios Enterprises, and I'm going to be talking about getting started with Nagios XI. So we're going to move really quick. It's still going to be fairly high level, but it's going to be focused specifically on Nagios XI. So we'll learn more about what it can do, and then after this session, Sam Lansing in the same room is going to do an advanced features overview. So if you like this and want to learn more about some of the deeper stuff, that'll be a really good place to do it. So a quick overview of the agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about a comparison between XI and Core just real briefly. We're going to dive into multi-tenancy and how to manage users in XI and how easy that is. The extensibility of the system with components and dashlets, MIBs, plugins, config wizards. The dashboards and the views, the reports and the various visualizations, including the capacity planning tool. All the home menu features, which is a wide list of options. We're going to dive into actually a config wizard and see exactly what that 6-step process is. And then take a look at the Core Config Manager, backup and restore capabilities, specifically what the Enterprise Edition brings to the table. The standard version is probably 95–98% of the capabilities of XI, but Enterprise does add some additional features that are of extremely high value, especially in a big environment. So we'll look at those, and then also talk a little bit about what's new in XI 2014 versus the 2012 version that was available previously. So first off, we'll talk about Nagios Core and Nagios XI. So basically Nagios Core is a very comprehensive monitoring and alerting engine. It's got a basic web display. You're configuring everything with flat text on the CLI. And it's a very extendable system with all of those awesome projects on the Nagios Exchange. Nagios XI brings more to the table because it still has that same comprehensive monitoring, alerting capability, and it can still leverage most of those awesome projects on Exchange, like the 3,500 plus plugins, but it's also got built-in graphing and reporting and all sorts of other stuff to make it very quick and easy to pick up and use and leverage all that power of Core right out of the gate. So it's got dashboards and views and reports, the Core Config Manager Advanced Configuration GUI. It's got a back-end API that can kick out XML if you want to push host status or service status information to other tools or web applications that you're creating. It's got an integrated database that's collecting all that state history and storing it for 4 years. So with Core, basically, all this stuff happens, and there's really not much of a tail of the tape. With XI, you can look back up to 4 years right out of the box automatically and say, here's what the performance data was coming in was, here's what the state history was, here's what was happening and changing. So all that's just bundled in, and a lot of people have put a lot of time into trying to duplicate some of these capabilities with other projects, and there's some awesome projects out there. So not to say that some of this isn't possible in Core, and I'm not going to stand up here and pretend that Core isn't awesome because it's a super capable, comprehensive solution. But XI, it's a very quick and easy way to do all the cool stuff that Core can if you extend it, and a bunch of stuff that Core doesn't capably have the capability of doing. So first we'll talk about user management in XI. So you can manage users individually in the standard version. You can manage users very quickly in bulk in the enterprise version if you've got a big environment. You can very easily customize the time periods during which your contacts are alerted. And there's also internationalization built in. You can see English, Spanish, German, French, Italian, Japanese, Korean, Portuguese, Russian, even a couple different simplified and traditional Chinese. And that's all built in, so you can, right out of the box, run the XI interface in a bunch of different languages, which is a really nice feature. You can customize the actual alert content as well, and that's one of the differences between Enterprise and Standard. In the Standard version, you would be customizing alert content on a per-user basis. And for those of you familiar with Core, in Core you have alert contacts. In XI you've got users, and there's typically a 1-to-1 ratio, so each user is going to be an alert contact in the Core engine. But that's not always the case. Basically, the contact is things like the email address, and the user is specifically to XI, like what they can see, what they can do within the XI GUI. So in the standard version, you can manage all of that individually, and again, in the enterprise version, you can do it in bulk. So the user options overview, you've got basic account information. You're determining what that user's home page is when they log in, so that's customizable. You can have either a custom dashboard you've made or really any URL you want. The help system, everywhere in the XI interface, you're going to see the gray circle with the question mark, And that's really useful for new users, because if you're on a page and you go, what is this, how do I use it, what does it do? You just click that icon and you've got links to documentation, videos, basically everything you need to figure out what that page is and how to manage it. In notification preferences, you can see it's very easy to determine, first off, if notifications are enabled or disabled for this user, and also what specifically they're notified for. You know, do you want host recovery and down? What options would you like to be notified about? And then the notification timeframes too. So if you've got an admin Bob who doesn't work on Thursdays, it's very easy to just negate alerts for Bob on Thursdays and, you know, make sure that the right people are getting alerted during the right times and that people aren't getting flooded with alerts during times that there's nothing they could do about it anyway. The notification messages, there's a bunch of macros built in that will show things like host and service and status information. In the standard version, those notification messages, basically each user you're customizing the title and the body content and all of the macros that are incorporated. In the enterprise version, you can do that in bulk for many users all at once, so you can just create a template and push it to 50 users with a couple of clicks. And again, in a big environment, that can save a ton of time if you want custom notification messages. And you can also send a test notification, which is really important for a lot of reasons. First, to make sure that your admins and yourself are getting the alerts when problems occur, but also to make sure that maybe a mobile number wasn't inputting correctly. A few times a year, we get a call at Nagios from somebody going, I don't know what Nagios is, but I got 185 text messages from something called Nagios last night. I don't know where it's coming from or what it is, make them stop. And a lot of the time, we have no idea where it came from. So that's another good reason to test your notifications, make sure they're going to the right place, so some poor hapless person out there doesn't get a flood of alerts. Managing users, here's a quick inside look. So these are just some of the basic ways that you would manage a user as an administrator. So if you look on the upper right, that's just a list of some users we've pushed into the system. It's very easy to add a new user. On the bottom left, we're actually looking at how we configure what the user can see and do within the system. So by default, users are going to be able to see in Nagios anything that they're an alert contact for. You can override that though here, and you can give them the ability to see all hosts and services. You can decide whether or not they can reconfigure hosts and services, what level of control they have over them, what they can do with the monitoring engine itself, the advanced features like the Core Config Manager, or maybe you're an MSP and you want to create a few custom dashboards for one of your clients, you can just make them a read-only user. So you can determine not only what they can see, but what impact they can actually have on the system as a user. And it's really easy to set up. There's a couple of default authorization levels, user and admin, and various degrees in between using the checkboxes. So you can see it's really easy to determine what people can see and do inside of the system just right within the GUI. It doesn't take a lot of knowledge. You basically just have to know what you want them to be able to do. For managing the notifications themselves, here's the notifications actually management. So we're looking at some of the macros and the actual text of the alert message. And that can all be adjusted, everything from the title to the body content and the macros that are involved. And this is actually a look at the enterprise option where you can push this to multiple users that we talked about. So again, a really easy way to modify those alert templates for a ton of users really quickly with a few clicks. For system extensions, interesting fact about XI, sometimes people will ask what XI is, what it's actually an acronym for, and it's Extended Insight. And so you can see I did some cool stuff with capitalization there. Sorry, just trying to keep things upbeat after lunch. So in XI, it's actually really easy to extend the system. The example on the right, we're actually looking at the interface where you would add SNMP MIBs. And this is doubly cool because all you need to do is browse for the MIB, a manufacturer OID MIBs to monitor with SNMP. You browse for it, you find it, you upload it, and you can even click the process trap checkbox to do some work under the hood and actually enable that for SNMP trap monitoring, which is just bing, bang, boom, you dropped in a MIB, and now you run one of the SNMP wizards, and you're monitoring with SNMP faster and easier than has ever been possible before. It's typically fairly complicated. Same thing with plugins. You can bring those right in through a very similar interface that'll allow you to browse for it and upload it. Config wizards that we develop, dashlets, components. And the other thing to keep in mind is that you can create your own custom components or dashlets or wizards. So there's a lot of flexibility for custom development on your own too. If you really want to dig in and make some of your own cool stuff, you can do that. It's supported, it's documented, and it's really easy to bring them into the system. So that's really nice. And of course, the plugins are your pathway to monitoring just about anything, be they Exchange plugins or custom plugins that you've created. And here's just a quick screenshot of the Nagios Exchange because it's awesome, and we were just talking about plugins. You can see here, this is a fairly recent picture, and this is right when we broke 3,500 plugins. You can see in that middle list, and over 4,500 total projects. So there's just a ton of people making a ton of cool stuff for Nagios, and the bulk of it is plugins, and it's all freely available on Exchange. So that's definitely a great place to go and check out. And dashboards. So dashboards, we talked about a little bit in my last presentation, but we'll go in a little more depth here. They're very versatile and customizable. Dashboards really have a do-it-yourself spirit because all over the XI interface, you can see the Dashify icon just to the right of the many dashlets bullet point. You're going to see that all over the XI interface. So if you see something cool in the interface and want to add that to a dashboard, you'll probably see that next to it. And when you click it, you'll get the option to decide which dashboard to add it to. Sometimes you can determine a custom size for it and give it a title. And then you jump over to your dashboards, and you can arrange it as you see fit. In 2014, the dashlets actually locked to grid, so they'll just snap into a grid and arrange themselves in a real nice, orderly fashion. Used to be kind of willy-nilly. And so you can create these great custom dashboards, and on the right, you're just looking at some examples of custom dashboards we've created, and you can see very quickly just about any information that's important to you. You also have a home dashboard, so when you first log into Nagios XI, you're determining what you see. And by default, that's a home dashboard that you can customize as you see fit. You can also make that any URL, whether it's an internal corporate URL or another URL from XI or just some cool website you want to see when you first log in. So that's possible as well. And in the enterprise version, you can also deploy these. So you can make these cool dashboards and then deploy them to your users and also keep them synced. So as you make changes, those changes are always synced every few minutes with your users. And so it's a really powerful tool as an administrator to make sure that the other users that you're responsible for have the information in front of them that you think is important. And then, of course, you can easily add them to views as well. And here's just a quick example of the homepage dashboard that I threw together. So it's got load for our local hosts and some information about Exchange's DNS IP match, Linux servers host group, just a quick status overview of those, CPU usage graph on the bottom. So this is just a quick dashboard I threw together of a few different things, but just to give you an idea of all the stuff that you can put together to create a custom dashboard. Now, views aren't quite as do-it-yourself. Views are going to be any URL from within XI or an external URL, but they're limited to that. So it's not, you can't just like slap together a bunch of different dashlets to create a view. But they're perfect for a network operations center screen. They're super easy to manage. There's nothing to it. You just click Add New View, enter the URL and a title, and you've got a new view in your rotation. And then you'll see a slider on the right-hand side that you can determine the speed of rotation with. And whether it's a dashboard or any external URL, you're basically just able to look at these important pieces of information on a big knock screen or just sitting there on your PC monitor taking a look at them. But it's a really useful tool. And like we always say, the feedback we always get is that people are interested in what's going wrong. They're not too concerned about what's going right. It's just, if it breaks, I want to know about it. And this is just another great tool to help you see that. So they're easy to manage. You can rotate them at a speed of your choosing. They're really easy to add any XI page. Actually, on every page in XI, you'll see a link on the top. You can just click to add to a view. So it just does a little extra work and just pops it right into views, which is nice. There's some defaults built in. There's a tactical overview, which you might recognize if you're a core user. It's basically the tactical overview. There's open problems. There's a host and service detail of all your hosts and services. Host group overview, and then Birdseye is new. That's actually a pretty cool view, and I think I've got a screenshot of it in here I'll show you. So here's the tactical overview, which again, if you're a core user, you might be familiar with. It aesthetically looks a little different, but it's that same information you're used to. Host group status, these are just a few host groups that were thrown together. And so each one of these you can see actually, so this is a view that's actually made from individual dashlets. You can see each of those has the Dashify icon. So this is just a view that was created with some cool dashlets. In this case, the host group dashlets that are automatically created when you configure host groups. There's also a ton of reports built into XI. They're customizable. You can always, of course, determine the date range, whether you use one of the defaults like day, week, month, year, or customize a very specific custom date range. You can filter them by the host or service group involved. They leverage the historical perf data to give you, all sorts of information and graphs and capabilities. All of the reports can be exported as a PDF. Many can be exported as a CSV. It just kind of depends on the kind of data that the report relies on. You can email them directly from XI. And in the enterprise version, you can actually schedule them for delivery. So you can just say every Monday morning at 9 a.m., I want this executive summary to go out to the management group, and that's it. It's that easy. So that's a really cool feature too. So the actual reports, there's capacity planning, there's an availability report, there's the new SLA report, there's state history, there's top alert producers, which is a great report. It's the problem children. If you have limited time, just look at top alert producers and go, hey, these 5 are having problems all the time in the last 24 hours. Histogram gives you alerts over time. There's notifications. There's an event log of all the system events. There's the bandwidth report. There's a network replay, which is kind of cool. And there's a network report and network query if you're integrating with Network Analyzer. And we'll actually look at the reports. So here's the executive summary. And it's just an aggregated collection of some of the other reports that are built in. So we've got availability on the upper left. We've got our top alert producers. We've got our alert histogram. We've got latest alerts underneath. And so, for a manager, this is a great report because they can just look at it and have a really good idea generally of how things are performing. And so that's a really useful report. Here's the top alert producers, again, the problem children. So, you jump in, and right now we're looking at the last 24 hours. And I see a lot of .41 and switch 1. So that would be a good indication that that's one particular device, if you have limited time, you want to look at. And so this is a really useful report too. And actually in the screenshot, so if you look at the top, you can see the drop-down in the upper left. That's where we're determining the time period, limiting the host group and service group. And then on the right-hand side, the star would add this to my favorite reports. So basically, you'd customize it the way you want and then add it to my reports and be able to just click and reference that customized report anytime. Beyond that, you've got the scheduled report option, and then you can export it as a CSV or PDF or email it from the interface just by clicking a button, which is really nice. So capacity planning leverages that historical data that the system is collecting and projects future usage based on it. And in XI 2014, capacity planning is, it got an overhaul. It's easier to use. Before you had to fine-tune a bunch of stuff, basically selecting a bunch of options. Now you basically just select a host and how far into the future you want to project, and it's just going to do that for all the services on the host instead of you needing to select a specific service. So it does its projection. In the top part of the screenshot, the square within the actual graph, you can get really specific information about that point in time, or just get a nice visual view looking at the graph itself. And then in the far right-hand block, you'll see the extrapolation method. There's Holt Winters, there's least squares, and a couple of other options that basically determine the algorithm you're running to project that future usage. And my understanding is that Holt Winters is probably the best all-round choice, but that there are specific use cases for the other ones. And the documentation, if you really want to delve into that, will explain to you what the best use case is for each of those algorithms. The capacity planning? Oh, I'll show you. So it's the extrapolation method. And you just, in the drop-down, you'll see all the 4 options. It defaults to Holt Winters, because like I said, that's the best all-round option. But there are pros and cons to each, so depending on what you're at, the type of service that you're monitoring, there might be advantages to the other ones that would be worth checking out. So that's capacity planning, and that's an enterprise feature. And you can see the graph itself, of course, you can add to a dashboard just by clicking an icon, and then you can have a dashboard projecting future usage for things that are extremely important in your environment. So that's really useful as well. Here's the new SLA report, and it's extremely easy to use. If you look at the top, we're just picking which host we want to limit it to. We can also limit it to specific host or service groups. We're selecting our SLA target. In this case, it's 99.9, but you could do the 5 nines as far as you want to go, as tight as your SLA requirement is. That's possible here. You'll also notice, pretty importantly, that you can hide downtime. So if you put something in scheduled downtime, that you don't want that to count against your SLA, so you can actually hide downtime and negate that from the report, which makes a lot of sense. There are some advanced options too, like you can assume initial states and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of granularity too, but you could just pop in an SLA target and hit a button and have a nice report. And so you can see we've got the host itself, that passed, and then we've got a list of every single service, and then the uptime percentage for those services. So it's really easy to use, a really useful report for an MSP, or even if you've got SLAs to internal clients or whatever it is, this is a very quick and easy way to demonstrate that and export a nice report showing that you met those SLAs, which you probably will because you're monitoring with Nagios, and when things break, you fix them very quickly. So here's the bandwidth report, just automatically, magically generated when you run the switch and router wizard. And on the upper left, we're actually selecting the port that we're going to do the bandwidth report on. And then we've got last day, last week, last month, last year traffic. In green, we have traffic in. In blue, we have traffic out. And then underneath, we've got a nice table where we can see monthly and quarterly breakdowns of traffic in and out and the max and sum. And then, as I explained earlier, you can just type on or click on any of the months and be drilled down to a daily breakdown of all of the traffic coming in and out for that particular interface. So very easy to use, and it's pretty hands-off. You just configure monitoring of the network device, and this will create itself for you. There's the network report and network query. Now, this would be Nagios XI integrated with Network Analyzer. And again, Network Analyzer is going to give you that IP origin and destination information. And so we've got a nice pie chart on the left, some really cool chord diagrams, which if you click through, look pretty epic. It's just all the IP traffic and how everything interrelates. And when you click on any of them, it reconfigures the graph to show, or the chart to show you exactly how those interrelations connect. And you can generate and export reports. That's the big advantage, is you can export these in XI. And you've got top talkers by source IP or destination port, top talkers by bytes, by packets. There's a network query report. So it's actually a really nice, really easy to do too. It's just an integration component, so it's very simple to manage. And once you do it, you've got really robust information about not only quantity, but type of traffic across your network. So that's a really useful report as well. There's also some visualizations built in. There's the alert heat map that's showing us on the left-hand side is the past, towards the right to the future, or towards the present. And then if you see a strong vertical line here, that's basically telling you that you had a network outage. Like on the far right of the alert heat map on the upper left, a bunch of stuff went down all at once. But those strong horizontal lines are indicating that a particular device was having a ton of trouble over an extended period of time. So again, just a really quick way to look at it and go, well, you know, what's having the most trouble, or when are our problem times? The alert cloud's kind of cool. It basically shows all of your hosts, and then they just rotate in the cloud, and it color codes them based on a few different factors. You know, is the host up, but its services have problem? Is the host in perfect shape and all of its services are? Or is the host unreachable? On the bottom right is network replay, and you're probably familiar, like in Core, it's the network status map. In XI, it's called the Hypermap, and it's generated based on the parent-child relationships that you define. Network replay actually allows you to replay through a period of time and watch how things changing within your environment impact other things within your environment, all on the Hypermap. So it's actually kind of cool as it plays through. That would be much cooler as an animation, but the screenshot gives you an idea anyway. And then the alert stream is basically just you know, the volume of alerts over time. The bigger the stream is, the more problems it had. And this screenshot was taken at about the same time as that top alert producers, and you can see that .41 is still having a bunch of trouble. So this would be just another way to verify that. We look at a couple of visualizations and reports and go, okay, that one's having a ton of trouble. Let's take care of that one. And so those are just built in right out of the box. There's also the home menu features, and I threw up a screenshot of all of them, and I'll cover them real quick, but there's a ton to see and do in the home menu. Under quick view, we've got our home dashboard, which we talked about. We've got our tactical overview, a bird's eye view, operations center and operations screen. And those are basically just really nice visualizations that are going to give you information about the status of your hosts and services in a few different aesthetic methods. All service problems, all host problems. So you've got open service problems, things that haven't yet been acknowledged, or you can just look at all the service problems. There's also network outages. And then we've got a service detail and host detail if you want to see all of your hosts or services, irregardless of their current status. And then host group and service group summaries and overviews and grids. There's Nagios BPI, which we'll talk about in a little more depth. There's metrics, which is a really nice component. And then you can, of course, look at round-trip average ping response time graphs for all your hosts. There's a Graph Explorer component, which we'll also go into in more depth. That's really cool. And then there's a BB Map, Google Maps, the Hypermap, parent-child relationship network diagram. Mind Map and NagViz is built right in. Network Status Map, which is the old Core Hypermap. And then we can also look at latest alerts and so on and so forth, and learn about the status of the monitoring process itself. You know, the process information, the performance of the system, and an event log. So here's the host status detail, and basically this is just us drilled down to a particular host. And I wanted to highlight this just because now in XI 2014, you can actually connect to the host from the XI interface via RDP, SSH, VNC, or Telnet. And once you set it up, you can just go to the host anytime and connect to that host and actually, you know, be right on the CLI if you want to be and do some remediation directly from the XI interface. So it's kind of a cool new feature. And you can see also here, under quick actions on the right, that third one, action URL for this host, one cool thing about XI is you can create custom actions, and it's basically anything you can script for. So, maybe it's just a script to restart a service or something, but you can create all these cool custom actions, and then your users can log in and go, okay, it's having this problem, I'll click this quick action, boom, the problem's taken care of without ever leaving the Nagios interface, which is really nice. You've also got performance graphs if you look at the tabs up top. You can do basic configuration, not full reconfiguration, but you can do things like modifying the check interval and so on. There's also capacity planning right in this tab, and then network traffic analysis and a notes section where you could maybe put a serial number for the device or something, just notes that you want to be persistent for that particular host. So here's the Birdseye view. And so we've got information at the top. We know what time it is. We know this is the Birdseye view. The monitoring engine is healthy. Notifications are enabled. We've got kind of a rolling log on the right-hand side of current events happening. And then just information about each individual host and the status of the host and its services just kind of blocked in. So that's a nice visualization that's new with XI 2014. There's business process intelligence. And this is just kind of a look at configuring it, and then nested on the bottom right, that's actually a BPI group. So in this case, what you're doing is you're creating logical monitoring of a process instead of an individual host or service. And so you can be alerted based on the health of that entire process rather than an individual item. Sometimes you want to be alerted on an individual item, and in this screenshot here, anything with an asterisk on it, that's a critical member is what it's called. So if that goes out, you'll get an alert no matter what. Otherwise, you're just going to be alerted based on the percent health of the entire process. So it's a really useful tool. If you've got clusters that you want to monitor the health of, this is the way to do it. And in the enterprise version, you can actually automatically sync your host and service groups into a BPI group and just click a button and boom, they're a BPI group. So it's pretty easy to set up. And a very, very useful tool if you've got clusters of hosts and services working together. There's also Nagviz, which is super cool. Most of you are probably familiar with it or have come across it. It's a really nice Nagios data visualization tool. Probably my favorite example of what Nagviz can do would be an actual picture of a server room with active icons over the pieces of hardware. I mean, it's really useful if you actually have to go troubleshoot the physical hardware. This is going to be really useful because you'll know exactly which items are having trouble in the analog world. And then on the right is more of a Visio-style network diagram, but you've got active icons, and hovering over these icons, you're going to have even more in-depth information about the plug-in output and the status and exactly what's going on with that device. So that's built right in as well. And then just here's a blow-up of the Hypermap based on the parent-child relationships you define, and Nagios will, of course, alert you intelligently based on those relationships as well. Looking at this, I believe the parent-child relationships are actually set up a little wrong. But it gives you a good idea of how it looks, and then, of course, in the network replay, you can actually replay through this and see what the impact is over time of one device going out and how that impacts the status of other machines. Metrics is really cool. What metrics allows you to do is compare like metrics across different hosts, so like services, in this case, we're looking at disk usage. And you can kind of compare and contrast. So you just say, I want to look at disk usage, and you can define a host and service group and then a particular metric. And it's just going to give you all of them stacked up in an ordered list so you can see who's using what. And a use case here would be maybe you've got 10 users with almost the same responsibilities and almost the same machine. Why is one guy using 96% of his hard drive and the other guy's only using 5%? It kind of helps you identify those outliers and see what's using the most. And then, of course, you can also look at graphs and gauges of the metrics information. So that's pretty cool. But even cooler than that, to me, is Graph Explorer, which just got a multi-stacked tab. And what the multi-stacked graph is going to allow you to do is pick any services you want and stack them all onto a Graph Explorer graph. And then you can add and remove them. If you look underneath, you can see the color-coded descriptions like the blue and the orange and the green. You can add and remove layers as you see fit and very easily drill down to smaller and smaller time frames and very easily reset the zoom. So it's a great way to try to correlate things and just stack services on top of each other and see what's impacting what just with a few clicks. It's a really cool tool. And then there's also a time stack performance graph, just a regular scalable performance graph, and then some cool service health and host health pie charts that are kind of cool. And then top alerts for the last 24 hours. But probably the real standout is the new multi-stack. There's a lot of capabilities there. There we go. Now for wizards. So the wizards are really cool. This is a short list of the wizards that are built into Nagios XI. They make it very quick and easy to configure monitoring of common devices. And there's Windows Desktop, Server and Exchange, Linux, Mac, AIX, VMware, whether it's hosts or guests or vCenter itself, switches and routers, printers, mail servers, email delivery, all the major databases, tons of different things you can monitor on websites themselves. There's an SNMP, SNMP walk, SNMP trap, bulk host cloning and import, auto discovery. It slices, it dices, it monitors. It's pretty cool. So it's a very quick and easy way to set up, and I'll actually show you how that all works. So in step 2 of the wizard, once you've said I want to run a monitoring wizard, you enter the IP address, and in this case we're going to monitor a Linux server. So the defaults that are built into the Linux server wizard would be RHEL, CentOS, Ubuntu, and Debian. So you'd select which OS, and then click Next. And here in step 3, it's telling you, hey, to use this particular wizard method, you're going to need an agent. Here's a link to the agent. Here's a link to agent installation instructions. So it makes it really easy if you're not maybe familiar with this particular method, which uses, this one uses a special NRPE build, but it's basically just NRPE. So if you're not familiar with it, you're running through the wizard, you won't suddenly get to the end and wonder why it's not monitoring, because it needed an agent. You'll know about it right here. And then you can even do things like, in this case, enabling SSL. In the next step, basically, actually this is the same step. So this is the top of step 3. And then in the bottom of step 3, we're actually picking the specific services that we want to monitor. So this is what's built in by default, or at least part of what's built in by default just for monitoring Linux. And you can see it's ping, yum update status, load on the system, CPU stats, memory usage, swap usage. So some really useful stuff that you're likely going to want to monitor, and you can just hit checkboxes. The default thresholds are typically pretty good, but you can also modify those here or later on as your requirements change. And so it's really easy to monitor common stuff. In step 4, we're saying, what's our check interval? Default is 5 minutes, but you can go as low as 1, keeping in mind that that's going to significantly increase load on the Nagios server if you do it on a bunch of hosts. By default, the system is also going to recheck once a minute 5 times just to make sure there's an actual problem before it sends an alert. But you could just change that right-hand 5 to a 1 and immediately send an alert if a problem is detected if you choose to. So that can be customized here right in the wizard as well. And then in step 5, we're determining what happens when a problem is actually detected and that retry interval has been met. And we're going to send a notification immediately. In this case, we can keep persistently sending notifications if nothing is getting done about it. And then we can also determine who it's getting sent to, your particular user, other contacts, or contact groups. And in step 6, we're actually able to add this to host groups, to service groups, and define that important parent-child relationship right from the wizard. So this is all stuff that normally you'd be doing with flat text on the command line, and you don't need to know anything about that to jump in and just set up monitoring of a Linux server right here, which is really nice. There's also an auto discovery component, and auto discovery is going to enable you to do an Nmap scan of subnets you define to bring back host information, host IP information, and the open ports that are detected. In the last presentation, we did get a little bit of feedback about, the question was about throttling the auto discovery, and you want to make sure that you're defining a fairly narrow subnet to scan. You don't want to just set it up to scan everything because it may not complete. It may put a bunch of extra load on your network that you don't want. So it's better to scan small subnets, but you can schedule it to happen periodically and then just set up an alert to find out if new stuff was detected. There's a lot you can do with it, but at its core, it's really just an inventory mechanism. It's a way to see what's out there in your environment. And then you could later configure it with other tools. And so then on the bottom right, at the top, that's actually where we're defining the scan itself. We can exclude IPs. We give it a subnet to scan. We can either do it one time or schedule it. There's also basic OS detection built in, which is typically pretty good. It's not always exactly right, but most of the time it'll tell you what the OS is. And then we've got our scan results on the right, and you can see it's just a list of IPs that were discovered. And then here's the full list where we're looking at not only the IPs, but also the open ports, the public services that were discovered on those particular IPs. And you can set up basic monitoring from here, but if it's a Windows machine, you'll probably want to run a Windows wizard to monitor stuff like performance counters and stuff. This is going to give you very basic monitoring. The regular wizard is going to give you much more depth of monitoring capabilities. And then there's bulk host cloning and import, which is really cool and really popular. It allows you to use something you've already configured as a template and very easily monitor all the same services on a bunch of hosts all at once with a few clicks. So here we're looking at Scott's server, which is a Windows server, and we've already configured it, we've tested it, we've made sure that it's monitoring and alerting correctly, and now we're presented with a list of the services that we're already monitoring on that one, and we can either select them all or select very specific ones that we want to monitor. And then really all you need to set up monitoring of 10 or 50 or 100 more Windows servers is the IP addresses. But this has actually been advanced because now you can not only define the address, but give it a host name, give it a description, add it to a host group, and define parent-child relationships for each one individually. It's just one entry per line, comma separated, and you can define all of that before you set them all up. So there's a little more depth than just accepting all of the default settings of the parent. So a really quick and easy way to rapidly configure monitoring of a bunch of similar devices. And then the Core Config Manager. Some of you have probably seen this or heard about it, but it's just a really nice advanced configuration GUI. If you've already configured things and you want to change a check interval or add or remove a contact, you can certainly do that here. And I am running out of time, which typically happens when I start talking about Nagios XI. But the Core Config Manager in the left-hand submenu, you can see you can modify hosts, services, host groups, service groups. You've got contacts, contact groups, and time periods. You can define hosts and service escalations. There's also some advanced tools, and actually in the tools there is the bulk modifications tool, which allows you to really quickly make a change across a bunch of hosts or services with just a few clicks and can save you a ton of time in a big environment. So basically this is everything you'd be doing with flat text and Core in a really nice and easy to use GUI. That makes it very, very easy to manage all of that and make granular changes. There's also a backup and restore mechanism sent in. Every time you apply configuration, it's saving a snapshot of everything that happened along with a log of whether it went well or went poorly. You're going to have a log of that. It's going to save a snapshot. And you can not only very easily, just with a click, revert back to a previous configuration. If you run into trouble and don't want to actually fix the problems, you'd rather just start from scratch with the new knowledge, you can certainly do that. You can also set up scheduled backups, pushing with FTP or SSH, or just save local backups. So there's a lot of ways to make sure that you've always got a collection of good configurations to revert back to if you need to, built right into XI. So new in XI 2014, it uses the Core 4 engine, which has significantly increased how much you can monitor with a single XI server. There's always been ways for a large environment to leverage XI, but now you can just monitor so much more with a single instance that it's really coming into its own on that front, as well as some changes that were made to how it applies configuration in environments where it used to take 10 minutes to apply config, now it takes 10 seconds. The web interface has been updated. It's got more of a Twitter-like bootstrap theme, as well as a search bar on every page to make it really quick to just type in localhost and find out where it's at. You can do the instant remote host access we talked about. There's the service status dashboard. There's also automatic decommissioning. There's actually a dead pool now where you can define that after a certain amount of time in a problem state for hosts and services, they're just going to be put into a dead pool and just kind of sit there in stasis for a little while. And then if it's in that dead pool for X amount of hours or days or minutes, whatever you want to define, it'll just be pulled from the configuration. So it'll no longer be monitored. So in a really dynamic environment where things are going up and coming down, and basically if it's been in a problem state for 3 days, you don't care about it anymore, it's a really useful tool. There's the mass acknowledgement tool has been updated because now you can remove downtime en masse. Before you had to do it one downtime schedule at a time. Now you can just do it all at once by clicking them all. There's an updated switch and router wizard, which can now do SNMP3. Used to just do 1 and 2, now it can do SNMP3, so you get the full range of network device monitoring. The MongoDB wizard, domain expiration, and then NCPA, the Nagios cross-platform agent, has a wizard built in now to just make it super easy to configure NCPA monitoring. So there's the help system integration, that's been updated. There's the SLA report we talked about, the backup scheduler, and then the advanced config snapshot archive. So that's what's new in 2014. And then the Enterprise Edition specifically gives you the ability to schedule reports and pages. It gives you an audit log of user activity, so you can see who logged in when and what they were up to in the interface. It's got the bulk modification tool, capacity planning and SLA. There's a little AJAX terminal built right into the interface if you just want to get to the CLI on your machine, on your Nagios machine from the actual XI interface. There's the BPI host group and service group integration capability, and then dashboard deployment, automated decommissioning, the dead pool, and then the bulk notification settings changes that wouldn't be possible in the standard edition. So that's a quick run through of the extra value that Enterprise brings to the table. And there's free, fully functional 60-day trials. We can give you a free quick start remote session with a support tech if you'd like some help directly from from the Nagios crew. There's the jumpstart sessions over in track 5 that'll be happening every day of the conference. If you just want to go talk to the Nagios techs and developers, they're right there 100 feet away and they'll help with anything you need. There's the forum, which is a great place to get help. You can register and post in general support. And then more presentations on not only Nagios XI, but pretty much everything else. Like I said, right after this one, Sam Lansing is going to talk about the advanced features and capabilities of XI. And then there's your program guide. The USBs have VMs on them. And then there's Nagios.com to learn more about XI specifically. So sorry to fly there at the end. Thanks so much for joining me, everybody. Are there any questions that I can answer? Hey, all right.
I have a few quick questions.
Just a second, there's a mic for you, yeah.
I have a few quick questions.
Sure.
In the Graph Explorer, stacking graphs, can that be embedded in a dashboard?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, that is Dashifiable, yep.
And then auto discovery, can those be added to host service groups automatically through scripts?
I don't think so, at least not out of the box.
Okay.
I mean, you can, basically it's returning all the hosts and all of the open ports.
So you have to manually.
But you'd have to manually say, I want to do something with this return
Okay.
data.
Gotcha.
They've got checkboxes, and again, auto discovery is definitely more inventory than configuration.
Okay.
You can configure from there, but you're only going to have really basic monitoring until you run the proper wizard or manually configure some real depth.
Okay.
But-
And then the last one, has HA been improved in Nagios 2014?
You are going to want to watch the presentation by Andy Brist.
Okay.
And I'd have
Okay.
to look at my program guide to see when it's going on, but he's going to talk about HA. I hope
Oh,
that's up
there
to,
we go.
yeah, I hope
Yeah.
that's up to date. Yeah, hopefully it is 11:30 tomorrow. I didn't update this in the last couple of days, but yeah, Andy Brist, HA, is going to be a great place to go for XI failover
Okay.
and high availability, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
The bandwidth tool, does
Yeah.
that go to the switch and the switch tells it what it's done, or do you copy files around to generate it and work it out?
You mean as far as like just configuring it initially?
No,
Or-
so you've got like the bandwidth graphs, how much bandwidth is available, you know, where's that information coming from?
It's,
Can I trust it?
It's using SNMP, and it's basically just telling you how much was used. So you can actually, and if I could show you the wizard, you'd have a better understanding, but as you define the wizard for each individual interface, you're defining what the input and output should be. So you actually define those thresholds, and then it can alert you based on them. But the actual graph itself is just showing you actual raw data for how much came in and went out.
Okay, so you're talking to my switches,
Yeah.
and then you're also talking to my physical machines. Do you link the MAC port of the machine to which switch port it's on? So can you tell me that the email server's on port 9, or do I have to do that?
If it's actually a server, you need to enable that SNMP capability so that it can actually do bandwidth. I'm not sure of the specific mechanism, but I know it is possible to actually monitor and graph the bandwidth of server interfaces as well. I don't know. I mean, it would just use SNMP would be the simple answer.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
I'm currently only using the Nagios Core, and I have a lot of scripts and stuff which generate all these text configuration files for the core, you know, like the object files and all those things.
Sure.
Would that all still work with XI, or is it only going to be able to be done through the GUI?
Some of it would, because XI's actually got, there's a user local Nagios Etsy static directory where you can actually maintain manual configs if you want to.
Okay.
So there's that. The plugins themselves will most likely work. I mean, it's the same monitoring engine underneath. So your custom plugins shouldn't be a problem. As far as the scripts that you use to actually configure new hosts and services.
Well, so we have clusters, so I'll get 300 hosts. They pretty much have the same name except for a number at the end is different.
Sure.
They pretty much all have the same services and everything. I don't want to enter 300 by hand.
That is
So I
where
just
the-
have a script that runs off this database and then populates the configuration file for me, so I don't have to do
Right.
any of that.
Yeah, that would be, what you would want to use is probably the bulk host cloning tool. Because you could probably do it just as quick right in the interface. Because, well, you'd have to have one configured, which it sounds like you already would have a similar device configured. and then just drop in a list of IPs and hit a button, and you just configured 300 of them.
Gotcha.
So it's real. There are ways to do the same thing just as quick, but I don't know if your actual, I don't know if your method right now would be compatible. Plus, you can actually migrate from Core to XI very easily. There's a migration prep and import tool, so you could probably pull your current configs and just drop them right into XI, and you'd probably have to fiddle with them a little bit, but
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
All right, for hardware monitoring, if I have a lot of machines, and is it going to be able to tell me which are Dell or which are HP without having to put specialized agents on those machines?
You mean like the auto discovery, for instance, or just
Yeah,
in
so
general?
I just plug in, I have two hosts, Audio 1 and Audio 2.
Yeah.
Audio 1 is an HP host and Audio 2 is a Dell host. Both are running Linux, but is it going to be able to say this one's Dell and this one's HP?
You could certainly define that, and depending on the hardware, there might be some specialized plugins you'd be running to check really specific things to that type of hardware. But Nagios itself, it would know that you're monitoring, say, a Linux machine, but it wouldn't know you're monitoring an HP Linux machine or a different kind.
Okay.
But there would be certainly ways that you could tell it that's the case, so that from then on, you'd be able to reference it very quickly.
Okay. Is it all right if I ask one more?
Sure, yeah.
Also, what if I don't want to send an email? Is there like a solution where I want to generate a call to a script for every alert, which then does something?
Absolutely, yeah. So all the email alert is an event handler, which it's just it's the most common event handler, but it's just running a script that says, hey, send an email to this guy when a problem's detected. You can define custom event handlers that can do anything you can script for. So if you can script for it, you can make it happen when an alert state's detected and do anything, basically.
All right, we've got time for one more here, I think.
Hi.
Hello.
When the users of my company stay in the report, the database is crashed because so many people stay reporting, generating
Simultaneously?
reports. Yeah.
Yeah.
The database is crashed. The core is good, but when many people stay generating reports about memory, about CPU, and what can I do to limit the use about reports?
I couldn't say that there's a mechanism to do that built right in right now. That's a unique case. I mean, you must have many users who need a lot of reports. In general, are you using XI, right?
Yeah.
Is the server itself generally kind of overburdened, or is it just clipping along until 20 people want to report and then it runs into trouble?
In a moment.
Ah. So normally it's good.
Yeah. But in the morning, when the people is coming to work,
And they all want their reports.
yeah.
Huh. Well, I would, I definitely get a hold of the support team and see what their thoughts are. As you know, the developers and the support techs are all here, so that'd probably be beyond my ability to troubleshoot or even surmise as to why that would be, but it sounds like a pretty simple cause and effect. But we'll want to connect you with some of the techs and they can take care of that.
Okay.
And maybe there's a way around it, I don't know.
I think that I can create users groups to limit this problem. Yeah, because all people can see any options in the use of XI. So all people is proactive. Yeah. Just click.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, as we saw, there are ways to limit the capabilities of users, but in this case, I don't know that there is a default mechanism to just say they can't make reports. Yeah, that might actually not be a bad idea. It's good feedback. I guess for now, you could just put a Post-it on each monitor saying no reports.
Okay.
Well, that actually is our time for today. So if there are further questions that you have, I'd encourage you to get together with Shamas afterwards, or again, down in Track 5 is the Jumpstart team. They're there throughout the entirety of the conference, and they can address a lot of these questions for you. We thank you for your time, and how about thanking our presenter, Shamas Demoret?
Thanks for coming, everybody.